Well, well, well.
Hello. That's becoming our new intro. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the 30 something podcast with me. I was about to say Sasha. That would have been interesting. Me, Tanya.
And me, Sasha. Woo!
Woohoo. How are you doing today, Sa?
Eh, could be better.
Yeah.
Dealing with some stress in my life, but
Mm,
it's on its way to improving.
okay, that's good. Yeah, I'm dealing with some anxiety in my life.
Oh,
Just general. It's just like a lot on my mind and a lot to plan ahead for. And a lot of the time, if my brain is spending a lot of time in the future, I'll get anxious. But I also wanted to say, and you know this, but after recording our last podcast, or actually during the recording of our first podcast, I was getting like increasingly anxious. Maybe it wasn't noticeable. And so I was a bit anxious to do this one. And it's not because I'm not really excited about it, but I think it was just because it's like you're doing something scary in your life, or is you doing something new and outside of your comfort zone. And there's like a few of them I'm doing right now in my life, like going out of my comfort zone. And maybe also like I realized, oh, this project is going to take a good amount of vulnerability and like fearlessness, I think. And that made me a bit anxious, but that's okay. That's normal. So I'm moving through it. And if I'm taking deep breaths throughout the recording, don't worry about it. I've come to accept in my
oh,
life
just
that
ignore Tanya having an anxiety attack over there. I'll just keep talking.
no, I
But
don't think
it,
it'll
it
get that bad.
sounds familiar because you know that I've been having like a really stressful week. Like I've been a bit upset, a bit, yeah, I guess upset and stressed. So thinking about this podcast, like, oh, I have to talk about stuff and myself. The vulnerability thing is also like feeling extra
Yeah.
potent today. So
No, but it's okay. Just show up as you are today, and I will do the same. And I learned to accept like one of my coping strategies with my anxiety that I've learned is just to give her a seat at the table. You know what I mean? It's like she's there for a reason. Me trying to deny her existence is going to make her worse. So that's why I wanted to say it out loud because I think it makes me feel better too.
yeah. Okay,
I
well,
also want to
stress
say,
Sasha and anxious Tanya, what are we going to talk about today?
all right, well,
Well,
today, what?
yeah, I was going to say last episode we left it on a real exciting cliffhanger.
Yeah, super exciting cliffhanger, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. But
The
you had asked
question
me,
was the
go
question
on.
was what I like about myself in my 30s. I think that was the question.
Yeah, or maybe it was like, what have you learned to like about yourself or something? I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
sure.
because we're
Something like
talking
that.
about like you accept yourself more and like yourself more in your 30s, yeah. Well, I could only really think of one thing, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword isn't the right phrase, but you're gonna know what I mean. It's like something that I think might be a blessing and a curse. Something that I think I like about myself more and more as I grow older, but then something that is also maybe causing me more problems as I get older. And it's my independence. And that sounds very vague, but basically, like, I've always been an independent person, like an emotionally independent person. Like, I never really depended on even our parents emotionally the way that I think a lot of
That's
people do.
interesting. Okay.
Like, I've always been happy in my own company. I've never been one to need other people's approval. I've never been a people pleaser. you know, that kind of like I'm just independent is the best word I can think for it. I don't know.
Mm.
And I think like the thing about not being a people pleaser has definitely like helped me avoid a lot of problems that I see some people dealing with in their life, especially when they're younger and they don't know how to, they don't know like what they want themselves, or they don't know how to say no and that kind of thing. And fortunately, I've never had that. And you
Mm.
could say, you know, I can come across like, I don't know if I come across rude, but because I'm not a people pleaser, I think people see that. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes
So
it's,
some people are displeased.
sometimes people are
The people
displeased
that
with
don't
it.
matter are displeased by you. I'm just kidding.
Um, and like, I think that that's helped me as I've gone through my younger years, because I've kind of dodged a lot of the troubles that some people might
The traps.
have. Yeah, the traps that other people fall into. Not everybody, but some people
Yeah.
fall into traps where they waste their 20s in the wrong relationship, or they, I don't know,
Or they try to
or
build
they
their
make the
career
wrong
without being able to
friends.
self assert and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, or they do the wrong job because they think they should, and
Mm.
it's not actually what makes them happy. I've thankfully,
I will say, sorry, if I can just jump in, I will say that's like one of the things I've always respected the most about you. And because I think I'm not naturally very good at that, and I've had to learn, and I'm still learning how to be a bit more assertive and not worry too much about pleasing other people. It's been really nice to have you as the example. And yeah, I think like watching you grow into someone who's really unapologetically yourself, I suppose, and you know what you want and what you don't want is has been a nice example.
thanks. But do you think I've grown into it, or do you think I've always been that way? Because I think I've always been that way.
Yeah, I guess you have always been that way. I mean, I'm sure there are ways in which it's evolved slightly, where like you become more aware of it. Maybe it's more intentional than
Hmm.
it used to be, or you've learned to say no in a more tactful way or something than when
I've
you're younger.
probably learned more tact than when I was
Yeah.
younger, I hope. I don't think this part of me has really developed or changed. I think this part of me has always been there, but maybe I've just learned what it is that I want or don't want. And
Mm,
that's why maybe it's come through more.
maybe. Yeah.
And then the other aspect of it is like just being happy in my own company, which I would say is the thing that I really appreciate in my 30s, because we get more and more alone in our 30s. I think that's
It's
the
easy to,
reality
yeah.
for most people. And for me, I've definitely spent more and more time alone as I've gotten older, especially like because I'm single. So everyone, mostly everyone of my age, is pretty much in a partnership with in a romantic partnership, and they spend all their time with that person, and you know they emotionally depend on that person.
Mm,
And I haven't got that. So I do a lot of things on my own. I make a lot of decisions on my own.
mm,
I you know, I go to bed alone, all that stuff. This is not to be depressing. This is to say
yeah.
that the fact that I'm comfortable doing that, I'm very grateful for at this stage in my
Mm,
life. Because it would probably be torture to be single for 6 years
yeah, and be
if
really
I wasn't
uncomfortable with your own
comfortable,
company.
yeah, being alone. I wonder if what I've got in me is a curse, because people can sense that I'm independent, that I don't need them, or maybe I give off something like that. And that's why I'm more alone. I don't know.
So if you were to imagine someone seeing you and sensing your independence, what is it about that that you think would repel them?
Mm, I don't know if it's about repelling people. It's about not bringing people closer.
Mm.
There are there are
Mm.
qualities you can have which naturally bring people closer to you and make people want to be around you all the time.
Mm.
And I wonder if those qualities are mutually exclusive with independence. I don't know.
I wouldn't think so. Or maybe just in the sense that, like, people who don't like being independent develop ways to latch onto people or to
Mm,
attract people so that they are not alone.
mm,
But I don't think just because you're independent necessarily means that, you can't also have the qualities
yeah,
that draw people into your life.
yeah. Or they may be attached to people who also like really need connection
Yeah,
with someone, and not everyone needs connection, but
yeah,
it should be connection with the right people. And
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
not that
exactly.
they're the wrong people, just if two people who just really really want connection meet each other, then they're probably going to attach to each other.
Yeah.
And if one of those people is an independent person and the other person's like, oh, I really want to attach to you, that's not going to work.
Mm,
So maybe that
it's
leaves
true.
me alone, where some of the time I could have made more connection.
Mm. But when you say more, it sounds like you're talking about quantity of connections, but I think that's a dimension worth highlighting. It's like you, Sasha, when you make connections with people in your life, they tend to be really strong and meaningful connections. Whereas I'm sure a lot of people make like plenty of connections, but who knows how meaningful or long lasting or whatever they are. Like for some people, they just enjoy having like a big network, people to have fun with, to go out for drinks with or whatever, but not necessarily like strong lifelong connections.
I agree with you, although I'm not sure if I'm being honest with myself. I'm not sure if the connections that I have made later in life are strong as they were when I was
Mm,
younger. And I think
mm,
that's just the natural thing with so many factors of like just how people connect with each other as they get older. It's just not,
yeah.
we don't quite attach the way that we did when we were younger. Only
Mm.
really in romantic relationships do we attach the way that we did when we were younger, I think.
You think? What do you think
Well,
you'd have in romantic relationships as an older person versus what you're missing in friendships as an older person?
well, I think that's a really big topic that we should leave for another
Yeah.
time, because I have so much to say on friendships in
Hmm.
in our 30s, in the 30s, in the 1930s, the roaring 30s. No, in our 30s, like how friendships are different.
Mm. Yeah, we did want to do a whole other episode on that, so we can save it. Was there anything else you wanted to say on that?
No, so just to summarize, I'm independent, I'm alone. Please date me.
If you're the one, DM Sasha. Okay, well, thank you for sharing. Um, the other things that we wanted to actually discuss today might not resonate with everybody, or maybe to some extent it will, but we wanted to talk a little bit about growing up as third culture kids as she lifts a Brazil cup. um, yeah, so growing up as third culture kids and also the theme of belonging. So I feel like we're going to have to define what a third culture kid is. And I have a definition to offer, which is, and I had to Google this because like you kind of semantically know what it is, but I did Google it. It's basically like somebody or kid who grows up in a cultural environment that doesn't belong to their parents' culture or their own nationality's culture. Thus, third culture. Um, does that make sense?
I think so. It's like when it's like they're let's say you're the child of an immigrant. You'll have your
Yeah.
first culture, which is your parents' culture. The second culture would be the culture of the country you're in, right? And your third culture is the mix of what you are in that context. Is it?
I don't know. That's an interesting interpretation. But I thought it was like your first culture being your parents' culture, the second one being your nationality's culture,
But wouldn't
and
that
the
be the
third
same?
one
Your
not
parents and your
necessarily, because
nationality.
you could be born in a country that's not your parents' country, and that could
Oh,
be
so
your
but then that's
nationality.
very specific, isn't it? Like a kid who's born in one country but not their parents' country and then brought into another country.
Yeah. I think it is specific. That's why I was like, I'm not sure that many people resonate with this. But that's okay. I think it's still interesting.
Mm.
But having said that,
Mm.
Sa, do you want to just give a brief overview about our geographical upbringing?
Okay. Our father is Scottish, and in his 20s, he moved to Hong Kong, where he met our mom, who is Hong Kong Chinese. And then that's how we were born.
We'll skip that part.
Well, that's how we were born, Scottish, Hong Kong Chinese. And then we um, moved to
Actually,
Dubai.
our dad also happens to be Canadian too, so we are technically also Canadian, which is a
Yeah,
bit
but
of a
he's
funny
only
one.
legally Canadian because he was born there.
Yeah.
He
But we
didn't
have the
like,
nationality.
yeah, but I don't think it's affected our culture.
No, it's just a funny little tidbit.
Yeah. So then when we were in our preteens, we moved to Dubai because our mom remarried. And then our stepdad is Portuguese. After a couple of years in Dubai, we moved to Portugal. And then that's our childhood, right? I mean, since
Yeah.
then we've moved a little bit, but that was how we grew up. So we finished
Mm-hmm.
school in Portugal.
Indeed. And throughout school, we were always in an international school,
Almost always. Yeah. I did a year
almost always.
in a local school in Hong Kong. It didn't
Yeah,
suit
when
me.
you're very young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so there's a summary of our upbringing, and a lot of the people that we knew obviously had a similar experience, although I think it's quite unique. But we wanted to talk a little bit about, oh, I think I've got an eyelash in my eye.
Oh
I'll
no.
survive. I'll survive.
You'll just you'll
Um,
just carry on.
I'll just close one eye for the rest of the podcast. Um, but yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and I guess what it's taught us or what it has detracted from our childhood in some ways.
Mm.
So to start, like what do you feel grateful? Or what is something you feel grateful for about the fact that we did grow up as third culture kids?
Ugh. It's so difficult to put into words because well, and not just what I'm grateful for, any of it, because we can't compare it to anything. Um, like when someone asks you, like, "Oh, what was it like to grow up in different countries?" It's like, huh? It was my life. What was it like to grow up in one country? Like
Mm,
it's really difficult to say. Am I? What am I grateful for? Um, I think like what really stood out to both of us through going through those experiences was the friendships that we made.
mm,
I never would have made those friends in Dubai if we hadn't left Hong Kong. I never would have made those friends in Portugal if we hadn't left Dubai. And even
mm.
though it is so painful to leave the place that
Yeah,
you've
especially at
you've
that
grown to
age.
call home,
Yeah.
you then are like after about a year that pain is replaced by gratitude for the new friendships you've got.
Mm,
So I would say that I think I was very grateful for the friendships. I think like even now we still have some of those friendships. And
yeah.
who knows if we'd stayed in Hong Kong, if we'd really have that same quality of friendship. Um,
Mm.
because maybe we
Yeah,
wouldn't have appreciated it as much. I don't know.
appreciate it. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know if we just got really lucky. I feel like we both really did get lucky with the friends that we grew up around. Or if, as you say, you just learned to be appreciative of them. I'm not sure. But it is true that because we have moved around, one good thing that comes of that is you give yourself an opportunity in really critical years of your life to create a fresh start socially. And it gives you the
Mm,
agency to be like, okay, what did I not like about the group I was in before, or the energy I was in before, who I was trying to be before, whatever. And you get to choose again how to create a better social life for yourself. And we had two
mm,
opportunities to do that in really critical years. So we moved to Dubai when you were 13, I think, and I was 12 or something.
yeah.
And then 3 years later, we then moved to Portugal. Yeah.
I never would have put it
And
that way, but you're very yeah, you're right because I think a lot of teenagers struggle
mm,
socially and they've got into a certain position or certain way of thinking about
track.
themselves,
Mm,
and that really traps them and maybe even influences them for the rest of their lives.
yeah.
I think you're right, like who we were in each social group was slightly different. Mm.
Yeah. And you think about kids that maybe grew up in like a really small town where the small community of people they grew up with was all they had. And you just learn to adapt to what you have and you find your own position in that social environment. And then you just internalize that as you
Yeah,
for a long time. And I'm sure, like, as you get older, have more experiences, you can obviously learn to break out of that. But it's a pretty strong influence in those years to have a rigid set of friends or community. And ours was always changing, not just because we were moving, but because we were in environments where students would come and go all the time, like every year. It was always so
yeah,
exciting to see all the new people that would come. Always so many new kids, and it was like I loved it. I loved all the new kids.
yeah, yeah, especially in Dubai. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the other side of that coin, do you feel like then maybe we don't have a strong sense of who we are?
Do we not have a strong sense of who we are? It's a really good question. I think maybe for me, it's just put emphasis on me trying to learn to be comfortable with who I am outside of any particular context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you grow up in such a in environments that are constantly adapting and changing, you start to notice or focus more on the parts of you that are staying the same throughout it,
Mm, yeah.
and you start to, I don't know, attribute those qualities as being who you are.
I think like this comes back to what I was saying before. I think because I was always an independent person, even as a child, even like as different social environments would influence me and I would adapt and so on. I think like I never really had a kind of identity crisis or anything until
Mm.
I went to university.
Mm.
I think like because I'd grown up in like such international environments with the same kind of people who have the same kind of outlook on life, I I was really adapted to that kind of environment. And then when I
Mm.
went to university, I went to a small city in Scotland where everyone around me was Scottish or English, and they were not at all like any other people that I'd ever met.
Mm.
And to me, there was culture shock for sure. Like they were behaving in ways that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, same.
Um, I
We
think
both went
like
to the same
partly
place for
because
university, so yeah.
yeah, I think partly because we spent our late teens in Portugal, where the drinking culture is very healthy, um, and the
Yeah.
culture is just very relaxed in general.
Open,
Um,
warm.
yeah, and then going to Britain, which is not famous for being open and warm, and not famous for
No.
having a healthy alcohol culture. Um, yeah, it was strange for me because it felt like I I suddenly recognized my childhood self in my. I felt like everything that I've become through living in these international environments is gone. I feel like I'm my like 7-year-old self again. I felt
Mm.
shy. I felt unsure of myself. I felt, um, like very introverted, which I hadn't felt for years. That
Mm.
kind of thing. Um, so that was interesting. And then I think like
That is
since then,
interesting.
since then as an adult, it's kind of an amalgamation of the two. Like I still have that confidence and openness, but I also still have this kind of childhood insecurity.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's okay. I think people carry those things with them all the time. But I wonder if, someone
Well, it
who grew
might be
up in an.
because I still live in Britain.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But I wonder, people who grew up in a single culture, so to speak, I would imagine it's very possible they feel the same when they have to suddenly change their whole environment. And it's like, oh, suddenly you're not in your own cultural context, and you're like, well, who am I then?
Hmm.
And I think the way that parallels with our experience is that even though we grew up in such a multicultural environment, it almost has a culture of its own,
Hmm.
that third culture international school environment. And anyone
Yeah.
who has grown up like that probably gets what I mean. Like, even if I meet today people who grew up like that, there's like this immediate affinity
Understanding.
and cultural understanding, even
Yeah.
though they grew up in totally different countries or whatever.
Yeah.
There's like some third dimension. Maybe that's what the third culture
I think that's
refers
I
to.
think that's what the third culture is. We can say it is.
Yeah, yeah, maybe it is. But that third culture being
Our
that, and
culture.
it's really difficult to define it because it's not like there's a set of customs and traditions and specific values. But maybe there are values like open-mindedness,
Hmm.
inclusion. So yeah, it is interesting to reflect on it in that way. And I guess like the other things I'm grateful for, pretty obviously, like having friends everywhere in the world is really cool because if I want to go travel and visit somebody, I could probably think of somebody in that vicinity of the world or wherever that I can go and visit. That's pretty fun.
Hmm. I think what stops me from doing that is that, like, okay, we were such close friends, but it was, we were close friends for 3 years when we were teenagers. And, you can't keep in touch with everybody regularly.
Mm.
it's just not realistic. People don't really do it very well, do they? So then you kind of feel like, oh, but does that person want me to visit?
Mm.
Even though you think of them so fondly, actually the state of your friendship now, years later, is questionable,
Mm.
which is, I think, one of the curses of growing up the way we did.
Yeah. That would have been the first curse I would have thought about if you asked me what is a curse about it. It's like, okay, your friends are everywhere, which means they're not with you. at least not a lot of them, or a lot of meaningful ones. So, and you get a lot of your sense of belonging and identity with the people you love the most. And if they're not around you all the time, that's really hard. And it means that if you want to keep your relationship healthy, you've got to put in so much effort to stay in touch with people all over the world. Thankfully, I think because there is this understanding with the kind of people we grew up with, I tend to find that a lot of my friends are very low maintenance in that way. Like, there isn't much of an expectation that I need to call them every 2 weeks or whatever.
Mm.
And if we do happen to have a chance to see each other again, I feel like there's an understanding that we're cool and, we still
Mm.
are fond of each other and the friendship that we had was meaningful, even though I have no idea what your life has been like for the last 5 years or whatever. But it is
Yeah.
sad. Like, you want to be involved in all these friends' lives. Even just, with the friends that are near you, like if one of your love languages is acts of service, for example, like one of mine is, and you don't get to do that for your international friends, it's sad. It's like a missed opportunity to show them love and build meaning.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like it's kind of like your relationship is frozen where it was when you last saw them. And then
Mm.
that's kind of where it stays. Unless you move to their country or they move to your country and you can pick it back up again. But it is kind of like that. It's like it's not really a friendship. As in, okay, that person is your
Friendship in the
friend,
verb
but
way.
yeah, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
not really a relationship that's in your life,
Yeah.
which is sad. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, how much meaning does it actually give your life,
Mm.
practically speaking?
Mm.
Yeah. It is hard. And, parallel to that, having family everywhere. We happen to have family that live in different places in the world. And that is actually like a real sore point for me deep inside. Like, that makes me really sad. And it makes me, am I just going to say sad again? But it's like, it is sad to think, I just feel sad about it. But it makes me feel sad in the sense of like, okay, where where are we all supposed to meet? Where, at what point do we reunite? At what point do we actually get to be there for each other and take care of each other?
Yeah.
Or like, if I have a family one day, like, how are we? Like, obviously we can fly and stuff, but it's not the same. Like, I
Yeah.
think we're both quite family oriented people, and I really want to be there for my family.
I think you're more family oriented than me.
Maybe
Mm.
I'm a Cancer, so
But
it's pretty family oriented.
I'm sister oriented.
Mm.
But I mean, look at us. We're in different countries right now. And yeah,
Yeah, and we
like when
found
you
some
say like,
crazy
oh,
way
when
to stay connected.
yeah.
Creating this whole podcast around us just wanting to have a conversation every now and then. You guys just all have to sit through it.
Yeah. Well, they don't have to. They're probably gone. No one's listening anymore. But yeah, when you say like, oh, when are we all gonna meet? It makes me think of our dad. Like the last time that we were all together was for the weddings. Was it 2 years ago or 1 year ago?
Uh, uh, 1 and a few months. Yeah.
And like that was for a short time, and then before that it was 2019 was the time that
Yeah.
you and I and our dad and stepmom were together, and then before that we were kids, we were teenagers.
Yeah, and you're just talking about his side of the family.
Yeah,
That
just
doesn't even
talking about
include our mom's
him.
side of the family being
Yeah,
there.
just
Yeah.
talking about him,
Yeah.
not even his side of the family.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say that was challenging about our upbringing, which has become more evident to me through my 20s, is I think that it's contributed a lot to this political ignorance that I grew up with. And I don't know how much of it was because of the way we were raised. I mean, in the schools and countries that we were. But I think like having been in really culturally diverse environments in international schools, I don't remember almost ever being taught about local politics or the people around me talking about local politics. And not just local politics, but even their own national politics or whatever. Like it just wasn't common for us to talk about any of that or learn about any
Mm-mm.
of that. And it
Yeah.
just so happens in our home, like we didn't really talk about politics very much either. And then for me, going into my 20s, where I happened to be in a community of friends that all were really politically engaged, I felt so ignorant and behind. And I was like, where'd you guys learn this? Like, where'd you guys learn all this language and ways of thinking about the world? And for them, it's just like, yeah, well, this is just, we grew up in this country and like, it's
Yeah, but I
important.
think I
And
mean the group that you were part of in your 20s were extremely politically minded people.
they were very politically minded people. I think a lot of them did actually study politics as well. I super respect them for it, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I've tried to absorb a lot from them. But yeah, so like the older I get and the more I absorb from other people, the more I realized what a shame it was that I think we didn't have a lot of that input as kids. And I'm still now trying to like wrap my head around a lot of political concepts and like political perspectives and just understanding the language and blah, blah, blah. But it is hard when you move around a lot or if you don't feel tied to any particular set of politics regionally. I mean, you can have your own sort of values and opinions, but regionally, because even regionally, it's also different.
Yeah. I think it's also like it almost feels arbitrary.
Mm,
Whereas I think if it's part of the culture you grew up in and it's influencing the culture you grew up in, then the parties you've got in your country's government and everything that it makes sense. Like it goes together. I think.
mm, mm.
And because we didn't have that, I think like if even if we try to learn, it does feel very arbitrary. It's like, okay, these
Mm,
people are named this and they believe this,
yeah,
and these people are named this and they believe this, but it's like, but that's not how the world is actually organized.
yeah. Okay, so tied to, I'm really enjoying this conversation. We've been talking for quite a while, but I really want to
I'm not.
touch on this, which is the theme of belonging. I've read some books, or maybe one in particular, around the theme of belonging that I've picked up again recently. So it's been interesting to like be thinking about it. It's a book called Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. It's about belonging and the courage to stand alone, I think is the way she puts it. But she mentions this one quote in it, and I thought I'd bring it here and get your thoughts on it and what you interpret it to mean. But this is a quote by Maya Angelou, and it goes, "You are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great."
The price of what? Of freedom or belonging?
Well, good question. I think I interpret this to mean, so I interpret this quote to mean belonging is found within and with yourself and is not dependent on external factors. But the price of that is high because it means accepting that your belonging is not attached to external factors. And the reward is great because it gives you like a real true sense of belonging that is quite courageous to have in your life. That's how I interpret it. Something like that.
Well, I don't know. Like, it doesn't really. To me, freedom and belonging are not related. When I think of freedom, it's about that I can do what I want, right? What's that got to do with belonging? I don't see it as related, so I don't know. It's difficult to understand. I mean, what I understand from it, even if I don't agree, is that you you if you really belong to a group, then you cannot be free. And if
Why?
you're, well, I don't know. That's what she's saying, but I don't
Oh,
agree.
okay.
I don't know why. Like, maybe because people are holding you back, holding you to certain expectations.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
that means that the cost of being free is that you cannot belong to that group. But then the reward is that you can then choose which group you belong to. That's what I understand from what she said.
Yeah, well, that's a sensical interpretation.
But I'm not like, what do you think freedom? Do you think belonging holds you back from freedom?
Well, actually, when I first read this quote, I didn't focus on the free bit.
But that's
I
the
don't know if her
subject of the
point.
quote.
Yes, it is technically. You are only free when you realize you belong no place. But maybe I was thinking about this in the context of belonging because in the book I was reading, that's the context it was brought up in. But
Okay.
anyway, whether or not,
So what
whatever
does
the quote
Brene
means.
Brown think of the quote?
Well, Brene Brown actually thinks belonging is both finding meaning in connection with others and like being attached to something, but also, and she feels more importantly, it seems, belonging in yourself, a sense of worth and belonging in yourself, and you being able to recognize that even when you stand alone.
What's the meaning of belonging in yourself?
What is the meaning of belonging in yourself?
Is
I
it
can
like a
kind of like
sense
feel
of,
it.
what does it feel like?
Yeah, I'm trying to put words to it. I don't want to try and just like reiterate what the book is saying, also because I've only read it like a part of it recently and I don't remember the full thing. But for me, I think I have started to develop the sense of belonging in myself, which actually in at this time in my life, I'm really holding on to that because I'm super untethered at the moment to everything that I used to belong in contextually. And I'm really holding on to that sense of belonging and I can feel it. If I were to try and describe it, it's like I know I have a good sense of my worth and I know I have my own back no matter what happens. And maybe this is a bit of a weird way of looking at it, but like sometimes I imagine different parts of myself as different people within myself. And that like sometimes I gotta have team meetings in my head with like the different parts of myself that want to say different things. And it's in that group that I belong.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
does it, yeah, I think so. It's like, rather, it's like you have maybe qualities. Those qualities belong to you, and you have
Yeah,
a value or something, and you belong to that value. Or is
maybe.
it more
But
like just about being loyal to yourself?
I think it's more that, like, I think I've developed a really strong friendship with myself. And like you, I really enjoy my own company and I really trust myself to be a good friend to me. And that connection gives me a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you what you think about belonging versus fitting in.
Um, well, belonging must be true to you. If you have to change yourself to fit in, then you don't actually belong.
Mm, that's exactly what Brene thinks too.
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't have any other thoughts on it. Next topic. Next question.
No, but I think it is important because I think it's um, very easy to conflate the two. Like finding a way to fit into a group, you might think is like finding a way to belong. But, and a lot of people might have experienced this before, you find yourself fitting into a group, but you feel really lonely or you feel inauthentic or whatever. And so, yeah, I agree with your perspective.
Or you fit
Um,
in and those people aren't loyal to you.
it's interesting that you've used the word loyal in relation to this a couple times. What do you think is a relationship between loyalty and belonging?
Um, I feel like this is like a philosophical test. The relationship between loyalty and belonging.
You better not get this wrong.
Well, I
I'm
think
just kidding.
I think it's everything. Loyalty is everything to belonging. You couldn't possibly feel that sense whenever you have any kind of relationship. I think first of all it's like, okay, what is belonging? I think it's like this sense that when you're with that person that you are totally comfortable and that you have that kind of family love. Like, oh, it's very difficult to describe belonging, isn't it? But I think loyalty is everything to that.
Do you think it has to do with acceptance? Because if I try to define belonging off the top of my head, I think it's about being able to be authentically yourself and having acceptance in that. Whether that's from other people or from yourself, but it's like accepting you as you are.
Yeah.
And I think maybe acceptance and loyalty are somewhat related.
I think I'm seeing it more as not loyalty with acceptance, but loyalty with trust. If I imagine, okay, who do I belong with? I have to completely trust those people. Even
Mm.
as a, if you talk about it culturally, like, okay, I meet another third culture kid, I meet another person who grew up in the same way that we did. There's a sense of trust there, I think, that comes from like knowing that you probably have the same, I don't know how to put it, the same outlook, the same culture as I do.
Mm.
So I can trust you on some level. Whereas when you meet someone, a stranger from any country, it doesn't matter, you don't really know them, and so you can't trust them. Loyalty and trust go together,
Mm.
and you can't have belonging without loyalty and trust.
Yeah, I like it.
Or you can't
That
have
makes sense.
trust and loyalty without belonging, whatever you like.
Can't have trust and loyalty without belonging. Yeah, maybe. There's another question I want to ask, and I don't know if I'll ask it very well, but um, what I was wondering was what the relationship is between belonging and othering.
Oh my god.
Sorry, is this a bit too deep?
It's just all a bit like,
All of it what?
why are we, why? What's the point? What's your point?
Hey, look, I've got a lot of questions in my head right now, and
Well, why?
I think it's
What does this question pertain to? Because we're just talking
um
about like these like philosophical concepts. For this is why I didn't like that course I did at uni and I quit.
visual culture.
Yeah, it's just it's like what? You're not actually talking about anything.
You know what's funny is that I actually really like conversations like these.
I don't. I
Uh,
never have.
how do we? Well, okay, I guess in my mind this question does have a bit of a context, but it is like a bit of big picture, and we don't have to discuss this much. But the reason I was thinking about it was I was thinking about how so many of the issues in the world right now and between people are related to the sense of othering
Yeah,
another group and
yeah.
attaching your identity to another group. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, I think, in that question. Like, can you have belonging without othering? If no, how do we do it in a way that's productive? Because we all inherently need belonging.
I don't think you can have
Do we?
belonging without othering. Even if you look at the basic human way of belonging, it's to our family. It's making family.
Or tribe, yeah.
And you can't have family if you don't have not family.
Yes.
So I think you must have one to have the other. I don't think you could possibly have belonging without knowing that there are people that you can't have belonging with, and that must be othering.
Yeah, I mean that does make sense, but then it begs the question, okay, so how do we want to define othering? Because I think there's some dangerous ways you can define
I
othering.
don't know. It's
Like,
not a real word, is it?
is it even a real word? Uh, I don't know if it's a real word. I think it is used in like spoken lexicon. But
Okay.
what I'm thinking is like othering can come in really dangerous ways, like dehumanizing other
Yeah.
groups. And from a psychology perspective, this was something that I, learned in my psychology degree that has always stuck with me. But there is a energy conservation mechanism in our brain that causes us to group and categorize people and also stereotype people.
Mm.
Okay. That doesn't excuse the bad behavior of that happening in the real world, but there's like a reason we tend to other people, and sometimes to the extent that they're dehumanized or really mistreated or whatever.
Mm.
And I think we should be doing everything we can to like rise above that and like not do that because you have control over your brain to some extent. But my my baseless curiosity, my pointless curiosity, is around like how do we make sure if it is true that you have to have othering to also have belonging, how are we making sure that it's not in an unhealthy way? See, I knew I would phrase this question horribly. I'm not actually asking you these questions either. I can see your
I'm
eyes
really
just
not
going.
the right person to ask. I have always hated decontextualized philosophy. Always.
Okay, you know what then? Then I'm posing this question to any listeners out there who have a speck of a thought about this, or an opinion, or
Or maybe you have a
experience, or
specific context for this question. Not you, Tanya, any listener. Maybe you have a specific
yeah,
context that you can apply this to.
yeah, or if there's anyone who's like a social scientist or whatever and can give a perspective on that topic, it would be much appreciated. Because we're pretty lost over here.
This reminds me
Um,
of one time when we had dinner with Rod, one of our closest friends, and our mom. So, like, three of my favorite people to have conversations with. we're at dinner, and it just becomes very like, I call this kind of conversation wishy-washy. Like, you're just saying words, but they have no basis in reality. Like, it was all like, yeah, you should live a happy life, and yeah, everybody happy, happy. Like, it was all just like life happy, but like, what are we actually talking about here? So I was completely zoning out,
I
like,
could so imagine that happening with us.
yeah, especially with our mom and Rod together. So honestly, I was like silent the whole the whole dinner, just like, I have no idea what is actually being said, and I don't know if that's like a defect that I have in me. I've never been able to even really understand a conversation like that, where it's like about concepts only, no examples.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm against concepts. I'm not. I
I
like
get it. I
concepts.
get you. In that case, it's not a question for you. It's a question I'm like screaming into the void and into the ether and just like hoping that something comes back.
Okay.
Okay.
Ah,
So,
othering. What is it?
oh, this
How can
podcast is going to
we
be
do
really
it
interesting.
without losing belonging?
Okay. So, I have a closing question then for you. I
Okay.
think I want to ask you.
What
Don't
is
worry,
it?
it's nothing like it's no more philosophical tests. Um, what is something in your life right now that gives you a sense of belonging?
My job. I have a real sense of belonging at my job for a couple of reasons, like in a couple of ways. I mean, one of them is my team that I work with, because I've worked with them for quite a while now. Like, actually, I guess to other people it won't seem that long, but it's been over 2 years, which is the longest I've ever worked or even stayed in any context ever.
Mm,
Other than our last house that we lived in for 5 years, and that those are the two contexts that have stayed the same for the longest time in my life. So like the
mm,
team, like I just feel, how would I define this sense of belonging to my team? I feel that I am part of the team, that the team would not be the same without me, and I feel the same about every member of the team. And
mm,
I feel that as a team we have developed our own kind of, well, I guess mini culture, and that is also my culture. That's how I feel about it.
mm,
And also with the students. So I'm an English teacher. I teach adults, and they come and go all the time. Like every week we have students coming and going, and they're from all different countries. So you'd think like it would be difficult to find a sense of belonging there, but I think because I'm like
forever chasing that third culture lifestyle.
yeah, I think because I'm like a figure that's always the same, where they come and go, but like we the teachers are always the same. It gives a sense of like, um, things don't really change that much in that wider group in the school, and they I think that even like from their first or second day, the students get a sense of what our culture is in the school, and they settle into it. And like, I meet these amazing people. Why are you laughing?
Sorry, I'm thinking about something else.
What are you thinking about?
Nothing. It's not important. I was I was listening to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I meet these amazing people. So I and like I'm a leader in that context. So I think I really do have a very strong sense of belonging there.
Mm.
Do
Yeah,
you feel a
that's
sense of belonging in your old job that you just quit?
in a way. In ways, no, but I don't really want to talk about that, to be honest. But I do
Okay.
want to tell you where I feel a sense of belonging in my life currently, which is when I play music. So like I have always loved music, and growing up I played music and at times wrote music, and played a couple of instruments and things. And then I really like disconnected from it a lot throughout a lot of my 20s. And more recently, I guess over the last year or so, really made an effort to reconnect with it. And not just made an effort, but I felt really inspired to. So it felt kind of natural. But yeah, like now when I sit down to play the piano and sing or whatever, I feel like I belong. Like I feel
Mm.
this sense of
This
my,
is where I'm meant to be.
yeah, or like I really recognize myself.
Mm.
Like, like a part of me that's an old friend, you know? So in that way, a sense of belonging to myself when I connect with my creativity and my music. And it's been really healing, so to
Mm.
speak, for me. That isn't to say I feel comfortable doing in front of other people, because I have performance
And a one, and
anxiety.
a two, and a one, two, three. That was the
Yeah,
intro to your to your
I know.
performance.
I know. And I
No, I
politely
mean,
declined.
no, I mean what you said. Like, imagine if we really had planned it that way. That you're like, that's not to say that I'm comfortable performing in front of an audience. No,
Yeah, that would have been beautiful. Um, okay, so let's wrap up here. We've been going on for quite a while, but I have really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I don't feel anxious, which is nice.
oh, good.
Yeah,
And I feel less
that's nice.
stressed.
Oh, that's
I mean,
good.
more stressed in a way because I feel like I've just been examined, been,
In
but,
not a very meaningful way.
but yeah, in a very decontextualized manner. But I feel less stressed in general. And
That's good.
hopefully, listeners, you feel less stressed too.
Yeah. They're like in a hole, like, oh my God, what do these questions mean? Um, no, but thank you for listening. Follow, like, comment, all that stuff, whatever it is you do on the platform that you're on. Give us a 5-star review if you want to be a buddy. And DM Sasha if you're the one. For her, just you're not allowed to like concepts. You gotta give her examples with everything that you're trying to tell her. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
don't say I'm a good man, because what does that even mean? You gotta
Yeah,
give
come on,
me
give an
14
example.
examples. What I said actually reminded me of a comic, like a cartoon, not like a comic book, like one of
Mm-hmm.
these strips that my friend has on her wall. And it's got two cats for some reason. And one of the cats says to the other, sometimes I think you expect too much of people, or you demand too much or something. And then the other cat goes, really? Give me 14 examples.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, let's wrap up there.
Okay.
Thanks, Sa. I enjoyed chatting with you,
Thanks, Ta.
and thank you, everybody. Love you.
Love you. Bye. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.